Allo Allo ran for 9 series and 85 episodes between 1982 and 1992. At its peak, it pulled in millions of viewers every Saturday night on BBC One. It was loud, outrageous, stuffed full of double entendres and terrible accents, and absolutely nobody involved was ashamed of any of it. The premise alone should not have worked. A British sitcom set at occupied France, poking fun at Germans, Italians, the French resistance, and bumbling British intelligence officers, all held together by a philandering café owner who spent a decade lying to his wife while hiding airmen under the floorboards. It was ridiculous. It was beloved. And for many of the people who made it, the years after it ended told a story the show never got to tell. Here is what really happened to the cast of Allo Allo. Gorden Kaye played René Artois in every single episode of the show. He appeared in all 85 episodes and over 1,200 performances of the stage version. He was the beating heart of the whole operation. The put-upon, cheating, lovable cafe owner who couldn't keep his hands to himself or his secrets safe. René was everywhere at once, hiding airmen, placating his wife, fending off his mistresses, double-crossing the German, and delivering monologues directly to the audience that somehow made you root for a man doing absolutely everything wrong. Kaye hadn't always been destined for stardom. He grew up in Huddersfield, worked in textile mills, a wine factory, and a tractor factory before finding his way into acting through hospital radio and local theater. He made his television debut in 1968 and spent years building a solid, if unspectacular, career before David Croft sent him the script in 1982 and everything changed. Then, in January 1990, while the show was still running and at the height of his fame, Kaye was driving through London during one of the most violent storms the city had seen in years. A wooden advertising hoarding tore free in the wind and smashed directly through his car windscreen, piercing his skull. He was rushed to Charing Cross Hospital and underwent more than 5 hours of emergency brain surgery. The medical team were not certain he would survive the night. He did survive, but he carried a visible dent in his forehead for the rest of his life, and he could never remember a single detail of the incident, not the storm, not the impact, nothing. While he was still unconscious and recovering from emergency surgery, 2 tabloid journalists managed to get into his hospital room and photograph him. His agent sued the newspaper. The case went all the way to the Court of Appeal and became a landmark legal case in British privacy law. Kaye had been violated at his most vulnerable, and the law couldn't do anything about it. He returned to the show. He continued performing on stage. He came back for the 2007 television revival and reprised René one final time. But it took everything he had. In his final years, he developed dementia and spent the last 2 years of his life in a care home in Knaresborough, Yorkshire, not far from where he had grown up. He died in January 2017 at the age of 75. René Artois had given him fame, purpose, and 10 extraordinary years. In the end, dementia took what the storm couldn't. Carmen Silvera played Edith, René's long-suffering, magnificently tone-deaf wife, whose singing cleared rooms and whose unshakable obliviousness was the engine of half the show's comedy. What most people don't know is that Silvera was already 60 years old when Allo Allo launched. She'd been working in British television since the 1960s, appearing in Z-Cars, Doctor Who, and Dad's Army, and had built a lengthy career long before Edith Artois made her a household name. She was born in Canada to a father of Spanish descent, and during the Second World War she was evacuated to Montreal as a child. At the last minute, her name was removed from the passenger list of a liner called the Athenia. That ship was torpedoed and sunk shortly afterwards. Carmen Silvera survived the war by a clerical decision she would spend the rest of her life thinking about. After Allo Allo ended, she returned to theater and continued performing into her later years. In 2001, she was diagnosed with lung cancer. She died in August 2002 at the age of 80. The woman who spent a decade pretending not to notice her husband's affairs went out quietly, with considerably more dignity than Edith ever managed. Sam Kelly played Captain Hans Geering, the bumbling German officer who was more confused than menacing, accidentally ended up becoming a trusted member of British intelligence and delivered some of the most perfectly timed comic performances in the show's entire run. Kelly had been a respected character actor long before Allo Allo, best known alongside it for playing Warren in the beloved British sitcom Porridge. He was warm, instinctive, and had the kind of comic timing that looks effortless until you try to replicate it. After Allo Allo, he remained consistently busy across British television and theater for the rest of his career. He died in June 2014 at the age of 70, just 2 years before Gorden Kaye. The two men had appeared together in a BBC radio dramatization not long before Kelly's death. It was one of their last projects together. Richard Marner played the stiff, scheming, perpetually outmaneuvered Colonel von Strohm for the entire run of the series. What makes Marner's story remarkable is where he came from before any of this. He was born in Russia as Alexander Molchanov, fled the country, made his way to Britain, and built an acting career that stretched back to the early days of British cinema. In 1951, he appeared alongside Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn in The African Queen. He brought a whole career's worth of genuine gravitas to a role that required him to be routinely humiliated by a café owner in a bad wig. He continued working into old age and died in March 2004 at the age of 82. Vicky Michelle played Yvette, the head waitress, Renee's most persistent love interest, and the woman whose breathless delivery of the name
"Oh, Renee"
became one of the most imitated sounds in British comedy. She was born Michelle Vicky Nathan and had been working as a model and actress since the late 1960s before landing the role that defined her career. After the series ended, she kept working steadily across British television, with appearances in Doctors, Emmerdale, and various stage productions. In 2010, she was awarded an MBE for her services to charity. She has remained one of the loudest and most devoted champions of the show's legacy, and attended Gorden Kaye's funeral in 2017 alongside co-star Sue Hodge. Sue Hodge played Mimi LeBlanc, the tiny, fearless waitress who replaced Maria midway through the series and became one of its most physical and committed comic performers. She barely stopped working after the show ended, spending much of her post-Allo Allo career on stage across the UK and internationally. She eventually wrote her own one-woman show called Mimi and Me, taking audiences through her years on the series, and later published a memoir of the same name. She also returned to television in 2009 with a role in the BBC Three sitcom The Lads Club. Arthur Bostrom played Officer Crabtree, the British spy whose French was so catastrophically bad that every line he delivered landed as a completely different sentence to the one he intended. Good moaning became the most quoted phrase in the entire show. Bostrom was a trained geographer before turning to acting and eventually became a fellow of the Royal Geographical Society. His last recorded screen appearance was in 2018 when he reprised Crabtree one final time for an anniversary production. Guy Senior played Lieutenant Hubert Gruber with a performance that was, looking back, quietly extraordinary. Gruber's obvious and unrequited adoration of Renee was played with complete sincerity rather than for cheap laughs, and Senior brought a warmth and dignity to the character that made him one of the most genuinely beloved figures in the entire show. Senior was born in Manhattan and trained in Britain, and has continued working consistently in theater and television in the decades since. Kim Hartman, who played the scheming Private Helga, and Kirsten Cook, who played the perpetually urgent Michelle of the Resistance, both returned for the 2007 revival and have remained active in their careers. Richard Gibson played the chillingly eccentric Herr Flick for the majority of the series before being replaced in the later seasons. His interpretation of Flick, blank-faced, precise, utterly devoid of warmth, was one of the show's most original comic creations and remains fondly remembered by fans. The show itself has never really gone away. A sequel stage production called The Camembert Caper was published in 2023, approved by the estates of the original creators. Channel 5 ran a full retrospective documentary in 2022 featuring surviving cast members. And somewhere right now, on some streaming platform in some part of the world, someone is discovering Allo Allo for the first time and not quite believing that the BBC made this for a decade and got away with all of it. They did, and most of them loved every single minute.